According to a 2023 report by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, nearly 50% of childcare centers reported operating at a loss or break-even point. With staffing costs being primarily a major concern, we wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry. So I'd like to welcome you to the latest episode of the Childcare Director's Chair podcast, where today's episode, we are going to shine a spotlight on the urgent need for childcare leaders across the country to step up and use our voices to advocate. With the landscape of early childhood education consistently evolving, your voice matters now more than ever. We are going to be joined tonight with Robert Hill from Cadazzle Childcare in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a passionate advocate and an expert in the early childhood field. Also a big advocate in his state as well. He's going to share a little bit about why it's so crucial for childcare leaders to engage in advocacy efforts and how doing so can really drive meaningful change for children, for families, and the industry as a whole. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for letting me come on your show. It's a pleasure. I'm truly a fan, and looking at your YouTube page has been phenomenal about the other guests that you have on. It's been inspiring, to say the least.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's talk about the current state of early childhood education and what pressing issues are at hand, right? So we're in different states. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of the same challenges. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on over there.
So in Georgia, it is, I believe the squeeze is coming. The squeeze of federal dollars going away, state dollars getting tighter. Right from the start, our governing agency has had a restructuring of sorts. So now, most childcare centers that we're dealing with subsidized care are taking a beating, but yet they have to figure out how to make it work. Also, you have privatized or the public sector of childcare where, community pay, they are also feeling it because everything costs more. So it used to be where we would get a 5-pound thing of turkey for our chefs to cook would cost like $56 for 4 5-pound logs. Now we get 2 for $65. But everywhere across the board, there is a shrinkage. And the people who have to carry it is going to be either the customer or the business owner, and they're told to just make it work. And it's a tough thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely finding that here in Rhode Island too. Our utilities are crazy. Our wages here are really high as well. And that stinks because we do feel like our childcare teachers deserve to get paid more than a livable wage, honestly, if I could really pay them what they're worth, because, they're amazing and talented and do so much for our families. But at the same time, how are we making everything work and pay the bills and keep the lights on? It's definitely been a challenge. And I think for some states, maybe yours, you could speak to this, but some states, a lot of centers are finding that their children are being funneled into the public schools through the universal pre-K. Do you find that in your state or no? Or
yes. So what part of the squeeze is that for a long time, I think since 1998, Georgia has been kind of a leader in the lottery pre-K. So we have the lottery program and some of those dollars, which our governor and state legislators have done a phenomenal job. And let me be very clear. They've done a phenomenal job of making sure that those funds do go trickle down to the public school and the private sector for childcare and for the Georgia Lottery pre-K program. It's just difficult because when there's money in the cookie jar, everybody wants a cut. And so the legislators, they are doing their best to try to get a little over here and a little over here, and they want to spread it out we have the whole program that helps fund college education from the lottery program, and also that Atlanta public schools and other public schools in the area have been missing on utilization. So if they're missing on utilization, they got to say, well, we got to put butts in seats, best thing to do is take our pre-K in there, which is a free program. For a very long time, the public school systems didn't want pre-K. And now they're saying we want it because it shows utilization. And we as private providers will get hit because if a parent has to choose between their sibling and splitting them up, or everybody going to the same school, they're going to go to the same school. It's convenience. That's one of the biggest competitor for early child care folks is convenience. If there's a child care center that is right down the street or one 5 miles away, the parent is more than likely to pick the one that's right down the street. So
let me ask you a question on that, because I think, each state does a little different. In Georgia, how do they do wraparound care? So, like, what happens at 2:30, 3 o'clock?
So with the Georgia Lottery pre-K program, you have the ability to have aftercare. And so the only time that, like for us, we only have wraparound care is for if you have a Head Start program, where they actually do additional things, like the ear, eye, hematocrit, and they, all the extra great things that they are able to do with the Head Start program. But we do have an after-school program that is allotted after 2:30 for the pre-K program. So from 8 to 2:30, it's free. After that, parents can, if they want after school, they can, and it will be an additional fee.
Okay. So that is similar to where we are here. So for those programs that are struggling, that could be a new revenue stream if you're not offering after school, right? Or maybe if you always offered full-time preschool, maybe you're offering part-time in the afternoon wraparound after school gets out. And then also summer, you also can, build in your summer camp programs too. So as we talk about the squeeze, I always want to be able to give some type of solution or actionable tip that you may be able to use at your program to keep you afloat. And those are things that we do here. I offer year-round service and wraparound care. And I have found that our public schools don't really necessarily offer that wraparound care. So families are still, they get that free space. And here in Rhode Island, they don't really even offer full day pre-K. It's half day. And it's only for 4-year-olds, not even 3-year-olds. No, I'm sure we're way behind where you guys are at in terms of when they rolled it out. Like now we're really starting to see it kind of really start to snowball. But yeah, so it's interesting.
Well, what I would say is you hit it like the nail on the head, because after school, if you run the numbers, even if at $75, $100 a week, if you get it for maybe 3 hours. So when you start looking at, cost of utilization versus staff and everything else, and usually when you have an after-school child that is either from the public school or coming in, their ratios are a little higher. And so you're able to do all, because the one biggest thing that parents want,
homework.
They want them fed, and they want homework done. So by the time, if you do those two things, you will have a great after-school program, and you'll see a major uptick in your balance sheet.
Yeah, I actually started the opposite than most programs. I actually started as an after-school provider. That was my main thing. My building was 100% school age. We ended up opening up pre-K because our families kept, just like what you were talking about, people hate splitting up their kids. Our families were like, we love it here. Can you please open up a preschool? I've been a school-age girl for about 17 years before I even touched a preschool. I worked it backwards, but you're 100% right on the numbers as far as what you get back in terms of time when you factor in ratios and the actual time that they use your program. You actually make more per hour on a school-age kid all day long than you do on a pre-K, and certainly more than an infant toddler. Forget about that. Yeah.
It's beneficial but you got to run the numbers. And if you have a major need in the community, and you can rack up 10 to 20 after schoolers, you will be able to really see it, and you can still provide a quality product. It's not difficult or a big pivot to have a quality product. The children will talk well, they can get their homework done. What we usually do is our lunch that we serve our younger children is also doubled. And so we keep that warm and then we serve that for supper with the CACFP program.
Yeah, that's another great revenue stream too. Not only does it bring revenue in to cover some of your costs, it's also a great way to attract families to your program over other folks who don't have that program. So we had that program for a while, and then I had stopped for a little bit, just because honestly, I didn't have a lot of admin to do all the paperwork that comes with that program at the time. Now we have an app and things are a little bit more streamlined, a little bit easier. But for a while, I'm literally sitting here counting tick marks on a piece of paper. So we're past that now. I know you can laugh at me, but I've been around a minute, Robert.
Oh, I understand. Hold on. I understand the struggle. So I'm laughing because I feel the pain. It's not fun.
So, we all know the problem. So let's talk about when we talk about advocacy, because maybe not everybody understands, what does that mean? Because especially if you're a new director and you're kind of you've been a director for 5 minutes, and there's a lot of those folks, right? Because a lot of seasoned people have left the field. You've got these new folks that have joined us. When we talk about advocacy, what do we mean in the context of our conversation, Robert?
So one, I'm an African-American male, if you didn't notice. And so what a lot of folks will come up and want to say is that we have a racist society. Some folks could say that we have a regulated society. I am big on the regulation of it. And when you really start to understand where rules change come in, and how ratios were developed, how even the water temperature in your center is regulated, the spacing, what it costs to put a center together, lighting, all of that just comes down to regulation. Mm-hmm. And so once you get that part, then you have to realize you have to be an advocate to say, how can I change the regulation to fit and benefit my business? And so you start to say, hey, if this can be changed, then I won't have a headache down the road. Then you say, well, how do I change it? Through advocacy. And the one part that is very tough for childcare owners to accept is to let go of certain things, such as we are very control-oriented people. And so we want to, we are micro control freaks. I will say it on recording right now. And we want to control every piece. Well, we need, I have the pleasure of being the president-elect for Georgia Childcare Association. And we have a lobbyist. Our lobbyist fights the fight that we don't know necessarily how to articulate appropriately, but we can articulate the effects of the business and have them help to curb and have the conversations for the legislator to change laws and rules. Now we can change and have reprieve in our business. But it's a process. And the one thing that childcare directors and even myself, we don't have the time to manage it. And my recommendation and thought and suggestion to everyone who follows your phenomenal show, find a childcare association.
That you bring up about ratios and things like that. And I remember watching a national show not that long ago, and there was a financial expert who was talking about if you change the ratio by one child, that a center could have one more child in that age group, the impact that it would have on the cost of care, because it would bring down the cost of care, because then that teacher would be divided by X amount of children instead of blank. And then when you times it by the number of classrooms and so forth. So, and it's interesting because every state has a different ratio. And as you said, where do the numbers come from? And I don't know the answer to this. So in your state, tell us, what are the ratios in Georgia for infant, toddler, pre-K?
Well, my organization, we're in 3 states. So we start with Tennessee. Their state ratio for an infant is 1-4. For Georgia, the state ratio is 1-6. I'm not 100%, and I feel bad about it, 100% on the ratio for infants for Florida. I believe it's 1-4. And
sure.
I apologize in advance.
So, yeah, Rhode Island, we're 1-4. So 3 out of the 4 states are probably 1-4. Yeah. What about toddlers?
So you start looking at a 1-6 ratio across the board. For me, I don't go off of state ratios anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I go off of NACE ratios, primarily because all of our centers are NACE accredited. And so when you start doing, it goes 1 to 4, 1 to 6, 1 to 8 for the 3-year-olds, and then anyone over 3, you're looking at a 1 to 10. So
Okay.
we've realized it's easier to follow NACE versus, because if I always follow NACE, it doesn't matter where I am,
Yeah.
I'm covered, and I won't have that lack of supervision in that regard.
So some of the states that I've talked with, their ratios, I was like, wait, what? They're pretty high. So New England, we're pretty I think we're pretty online with NACE as well. We're 1 to 9 with 3-year-olds, 1 to 10 with 4-year-olds, 1 to 13 with school age. A little less if you have 5-year-olds in the mix. But
Georgia's state ratio for older children like 5 or 6 is like 1 to 20, 1 to 15, 1 to 25.
yeah,
Like a 3-year-old is 1 to 15, and like a 5-year-old is like 1 to 25.
right.
And some programs need to have that to survive, right? So it's a necessity, and it just shows the great quality of teacher that you can have to handle one teacher for that number of children. It's just they are talented ones.
And I wonder if business-wise, when franchises and big corporations pick states, if they're picking states where they can make a larger profit margin, right, than per se a mom and pop in a state that has a much smaller margin. So getting back to the advocacy is like, what is that? And I love that you use NACE. What is best practice and what is the standard? And then building your business model around that, because then it's not all willy-nilly.
So the two things that I've realized that are really valuable come into from the environmental rating scale, or the ERS.
Oh, I know all about them.
Okay. So the ERS, the ITERS, that is, and even my business folks are like, how do I understand childcare? And I'll give them that. It is a quantitative measurable tool that will say, hey, you need how many blocks in this area? You need how many this and how many that? It gives you a number. Between the ERS and between NACE, you can carve out what a childcare should be, from materials to everything else. And the tough part about it is doing it, because it takes a lot. Oh, and so when you look at advocacy and you want to convey what it takes to produce quality, the way to actually tell a legislator who could be your next door neighbor, and they may not understand the troubles that you have. So how do you say, okay, I have to buy 3 sets of blocks for my block area. If 1 or 2 of them go missing, then I am not technically in compliance or reliable for this tool. Now, 1 block went missing. They say, well, no big deal, get another block. Well, it may be a specialty block from Community Playthings, and that may cost $70. So how does that cost get conveyed to someone who's making a legislative law, saying that the ratio has to be 1 to 3 for an infant? Like, you just killed $30,000 out of my budget for multiple things. And then how does a childcare owner, director, fight that issue with them in the center dealing with someone who called out and need to go down to the state office and the local legislator and say, hey, we have an issue, we need to sit and talk about this? It's very difficult for childcare owners, directors to operate and have advocacy across the board.
Yeah. So being part of a membership group and contributing in some way, you might not be able to leave your center. You can write an email. You can write a letter. The next time that your advocacy group in your state asks you to testify, you can testify. You can get to the state house on a day that's really important, just like we make coverage for our vacation. It is important. It's true, right? But everybody can send an email. Everybody can write a letter. And if you have a great advocacy group in your state, which many of us do, honestly, they've already written a letter for you and they're just asking you to sign it. And here's the person you send it to. Is that truth or not, Robert?
That's true. I'll give you the tidbit from talking to legislators. they will say if they get 5 people calling about a topic, it's a big deal. So if you have parents, and the tough part about it is they will see the same people over and over again, and they get a little tired of it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you get to know legislators. Like, I've gotten to know, the commissioner for decal, which is right from the start for Georgia. I've gotten to know legislators who have done phenomenal jobs, and they fight a different fight than we do. But being active on a very small level, like going down once a quarter
Mm-hmm.
and speaking at something may have an issue on, it's important.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the best way I can say.
The other thing too is like every one of us listening right now have a social media account. Every one of us you have 2 friends, right? Everybody that's listening to the show, you have friends on your social media. When there are days of importance, like walk out of work day, even though we all know we can't really afford to do that. But the point is, right, the day with no childcare, the point is advocate that on your social media. Share that message in your parent letter, right? Because again, if you get nobody likes angry parents. You don't like it as a business owner, and they don't like it up in the state house. But the good thing is, I'm going to spin this positive for a minute. The nice thing is we are finally part of the conversation. You cannot turn on any TV channel, any newspaper without hearing about the child care crisis. People can't afford it. Centers are closing down one after another, like dominoes. You cannot miss it. So now we have the mic. We have all these platforms, all these vehicles to spread the message on how you support either child care centers, early childhood education, child care teachers, or early childhood educators, however you prefer to be called. But we have the opportunity now. People are finally listening. So do what you can, right? It's not, everybody thinks that it doesn't have to be a big thing, but you have to be active in some kind of way. Can you share some successful examples of advocacy campaigns within the Child Care Center that maybe have led to some significant positive changes?
So Georgia Child Care Association takes advocacy very seriously, to the point where in the last legislative session, in our version of Universal Pre-K, our Georgia Lottery Pre-K, we fought for a very long time to have the dollars actually match what it costs to run the program. And so between our lobbyists and between our administration and the council, they took that upon themselves to push that with legislators and make it a topic of discussion. And so when they made it a topic, then they said, okay, well, what's the problem? They got to the problem and said, I'm getting funded for something and it costs X. But the delta of it is this gap. And I have to cover the gap. And so my program suffers because I can't get rid of it because it's a great program, but I'm still having to cover this. So they upped that process. The legislator listened to the providers, and they really went down to what's necessary, and they got more funding for that. Another topic that was very helpful, exempt programs. So programs that didn't have to operate under the same rules and regulations that a licensed child care or home care provider would have to operate. So let's say a karate school or something to that extent in Georgia, it was an issue because they could basically run a summer camp or another program without a license.
Mm-hmm.
And so our lobbyists in the GCCA, or Georgia Child Care Association, went around and said, hey, we are going to fight this fight for years, actually, like 3 to 4 years, pushing at the legislator, pushing it down at our decal office and saying, hey, we need this change. And this year, they actually made that change, which is leveling the playing field for quality for the children that we all serve.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the one thing that is the biggest part about it is let's all play by the same set of rules.
Yeah.
We don't need to have this program over here can do this and this program here do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when there's an issue, the news it puts the title as a daycare or child care center, even if it was whatever it is, we all, us licensed programs who are doing it right, get the backlash, and then get 10 or 15 parents asking, well, what about this? I heard it on the news. And we have to now answer to that saying, well, we really want to say they're not licensed or they're an exempt program. So that's the two examples that Georgia Childcare Association has done with our lobbyists, with our new CEO is just got installed, Idisha Bellamy. She's phenomenal. I'm proud to be a part of it and to see the change that it takes place.
Yeah, those are great examples. Thank you for sharing. And for those of you who are listening, if you have some great examples too, share with us in either the text of the show, our leadership group on Facebook, or if you're watching this on YouTube, leave it in the comments below, because I'd love to hear what's going on in other states. We've got a great group here in Rhode Island too, and we just got our CCAP reimbursement has gone up, quite a bit. It's definitely helped improve some coverage, as you said, that gap. We've got a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of money, but in the last 2 years, we have gotten additional funds for our teachers, retention bonuses. They have free schooling through the TEACH program. So we've got a lot of money being, trying to help level off the field for not only centers, but also the teachers who really make the impact for the children directly. So what strategies do you all use over there to mobilize childcare professionals and the community to join your advocacy efforts?
Awareness. It is a straight marketing play. And from a marketing perspective is that you need videos like this. You need to have people talking to a camera, the screen, and just beating the drum of awareness. Like, hey, did you realize that they're getting ready to vote? Do you have any issues or concerns that would be important? We're listening. We want to fight that fight. Because when you start to say your organization or your advocacy group or association has 50% or 100% of the child cares in that state, the governor's going to listen to you. The legislators are going to realize that you guys have a block of votes that can sway one way or another, because any child care facility has, let's say, at 100 children, they have 200 voting people that are now available for what that owner wants to communicate. And if you get a chain that has 20, 30 centers at 100, it starts to multiply very quickly. Yeah. So every child came from, outside of, any type of a scenario, but typically 2 people. And so those 2 people typically are going to vote or have the ability to vote. And so people like to listen when you say we have 50% of childcare centers. That's your power, is in the number. And to come up and be like, we now have an issue with this. And they'll tell you, no, it won't happen. Or they'll tell you, this is how we can get it done. Yeah. And here's the compromise. And it's, politics at its greatest.
Yeah, I don't talk about politics a lot on this show, but, this is such a national thing. I mean, a couple days ago, the president candidates were talking about childcare. It's obviously a major, major, major challenge, right? Yeah. When we're, on that level of a stage to talk about. So what are some things that childcare leaders can do to balance their day-to-day responsibilities while also taking a little piece of this advocacy work? Because I know they're probably thinking, like, Erica, I already have so much to do in my day-to-day. But maybe what are some practical tips for managing this dual focus? Because right now we've got the attention. You all need the money. We all need the support. The families need us to advocate. It's not even just us, right? Because we're very giving. It's not just us that we're advocating for. We are advocating for our children and our families too. We want them to have affordable childcare. We want them to have quality childcare. But we have to make it work for everybody, right? Because this isn't a bunch of greedy people just sitting around going, I need a new Range Rover. I don't know about you, but for me, that's not my why, right? I mean, yes, I want to be able to feed my family, turn on my lights, and occasionally take a vacation like every other human being, right? But at the end of the day, really, truly, the heart of it is we're advocating for children to have high quality early childhood education. So How do we do this as leaders? Because that's really, again, where it starts.
So just being realistic, if there's not an association in your state, start one. Because the reality of it is that many hands make light work. So if we all, like Georgia Childcare Association, I think maybe right now we're restructuring our packaging, but at $4.99 is the yearly membership. So at that cost, when you have, 2,000 members, you start to do all the things necessary, and they can then hire an army that can fight the fight for your childcare center. Because, the reason why, for me, advocacy and being a part of GCCA is a big deal is because if I fight for my issue just as a selfish purpose, I also am fighting for my other childcare owner. And so that's one thing, because if anything knows, you cannot be in every classroom. And if you have multiple sites, you can't be at every center. So how do you still get your word out and fight the fight at the same time? You need other people who are competent and are able to push the issues that are important to us. So that's one rule. I am a nerd when it comes to marketing and automation. I love automation. My parents hate it because they're like, you always want to create something to automate and save something. I'm always going to do that. And they talk about me until they're like, I really like what you did there. This industry is probably the worst regarding paper. We have a ton of paper. And so if you can find ways to cut the paper and the process down, your life could be significantly increased. And you could get time back. Even with AI now, you're able to, some people use AI to answer emails. I'm not saying we're there. I'm not saying early child care is there yet, because you have parents asking really detailed questions. But automation and marketing is going to be one of the better things that help move that along.
When I think about this, I think about advocacy in a way that, well, one, we have our own circle of influence as leaders. So if I have 42 staff and 270 parents, and I say, let's get the word out, that circle, right? That's almost already over 300 people. The other thing that I think is interesting is because I'm very people oriented, if I think about how do I grow my team, and when I say leadership, I'm not talking about titles, I'm talking about just my leadership team in my building, in my business, in my school. Our culture is one about giving community. So I can give a very specific example. So we had Strolling Thunder, which was in our state last year, and it was where a particular day that everybody kind of went to the State House. I did not go. I stayed, and I sent 2 lead teachers up. And they really enjoyed, one, getting out of the classroom and just being in the early childhood community. Because, again, normally it's the owners. We get to leave. We get to get out. They didn't have that opportunity. I said, you know what? I'm going to give you the opportunity to go. And it gave them the opportunity to lead and really see what it's all about. And they came back. They were so engaged. They were so excited about advocacy. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be you as the quote unquote leader. I believe in building your team, building your leaders, and leading by example. And so that's a perfect way to do that, to get your team energized. But they're not going to get energized if you just tell them about it. You got to give them a little piece to let them try it out. And if you're part of the membership organization, you don't always got to be the one to go to those meetings. Send some of your other folks, right? Maybe if there's 4 meetings in a year, you go to one, your assistant director goes to one, your best lead teacher, your new TA, so that people can get a vibe for your culture too. So that's just my thoughts on that. So is there anything before we wrap up this episode that I didn't ask you that you really would like to leave on the mic?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Definitely around advocacy. I think if there is, I'm going to be the association guy. Sign up, find it, get to it, and really push for being a part of a team that will help fight your fight. Because that in itself we can't do it alone. I'm not big enough to do it alone. Even the biggest childcare organization is a part of for our state, Bright Horizon, they have a board seat, and they are a part of it as well, because they are 5% of all childcare worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're a part. So if they're a part and they're the biggest one, that is something that I would say the biggest piece is that I would leave with. And focus on marketing, but I like the marketing piece of what it can do. Those two things are gonna be pivotal for all childcare businesses.
All right. Awesome. So a couple of things I want to leave you guys with. Number one, if you liked Robert, who wouldn't like Robert? As he mentioned, he is into marketing, and we're going to talk about that on another episode. So join us for that. Keep your eye out for that. Number two, if you have a childcare association in your state, leave it in the comments below or text the show. We'll share that with folks there, because you may be in a state and you're not sure who to connect with. So we'll try to get as much information as we can out there for you so you can start making those connections. If you have not liked, followed, shared, comment, I don't care how you do it, please do one of those things. It allows us to continue to keep bringing you great content and great guests like my friend Robert here today. And remember, it's the small details that make a big impact on the success of your childcare business. That's all for now.